So I fell apart in my first 2 Olympic distance triathlons. I wanted to give you guys 6 of my biggest learnings that I took away from those races. Now, as I transition from more of a strength-based athlete to more of a endurance-based and strength-based athlete, there are some considerations that I had to take on board, which would have made a massive difference in my Olympic distance triathlons. Let's get into the 6 lessons that I discovered after kind of falling apart in my first 2 Olympic triathlons. Lesson number 1, not getting a swim coach sooner. Now, as a coach myself, this kind of sounds really obvious that I should have hired a coach for something that I'm not necessarily good at. But I personally thought because I'm a coach, I'll be able to make the necessary changes throughout my swim to make me improve week on week. Now, at the start, I got in with my wetsuit into the open water and I was kind of slightly improving. I was having hit and miss sessions, so I was swimming once a week. Sometimes it'd be good, sometimes it'd be bad. But after 12 weeks of probably 4 to 5 good sessions and 6 to 7, say, bad sessions, I had enough. I tried to get a swim coach to kind of give me some pointers to help me with my stroke, because I couldn't understand why I was so slow compared to everyone else that I know that was swimming. I have a decent level of fitness and it just wasn't making sense. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't get a swim coach before my first triathlon. So I did my first triathlon, got through the swim. I done it in a moderate to slow time, around 43 minutes. Now, after just 2 lessons, 2 major flaws in my swim stroke, which was causing me to essentially slow myself down, were highlighted. The first one was my right hand was entering the water completely fine, but every time my left hand would come in, I'd essentially do an Ironman and push my palm into the water, essentially putting the brakes on every time my left arm entered that water. The second issue was the fact I was bilaterally breathing, so breathing out my right side and my left side. Every time I breathe out my right, my left arm wouldn't come over well. But when I breathe on my left side, I'll be able to get a nice big reach with my left hand. So after those 2 lessons, the main changes were I started to focus on only breathing out my left side. So I got a good bit of rotation of the torso with a nice big reach. And then I really focused on entering the water and piercing the water rather than putting those brakes on. Now, lesson number 2, I should have been racing based off power or perceived effort rather than the chase down mindset. Now, in both of my triathlons, I knew my swim would let me down. So it meant as soon as I got out of the water, I pretty much was in the mindset of attack, attack, attack on the bike and try to catch the front pack as much as I can. So the 2 major problems here is, number 1, by pushing so hard and having such a high heart rate on the bike, it means fueling while you're on the bike, the easiest time to fuel is really hard. 1, you don't want to because your heart rate's so high, you don't want to consume any calories. And 2, your mindset isn't on endurance, it's on attack. So even with the plan that you might have, you'll probably more likely skip your mind because you're focusing on just attacking that next person, attacking the next person. And point number 2 is pushing beyond your sustainable threshold power means that by the time you get to your run, you've got nothing left. I discovered very quickly on both of my triathlons. Now, lesson number 3, running too hard off the bike in my brick training sessions. So this point kind of goes pre-race. So this wasn't necessarily a race learning, but I discovered that as I was racing, I realized the holes in my training that didn't prepare me well enough for the actual race itself. So initially in my head, my lack of experience, I was thinking, right, do my brick session, do whatever distance that I was planning on doing, and then run off the bike at the pace that I want to complete my 10K in. Now, I wanted to complete my 10K in 50 minutes or under. So I knew that I had to run around a 450 something pace, normally about 455. I can tell you, it didn't quite work out like that. Now, if I would have utilized more easy runs off the bike, I would have been able to learn the skill of managing your heart rate coming from a high intensity bike, taking it into an easy run, letting my heart rate come down, and then gradually let that heart rate elevate as the race progresses, rather than getting off the bike with a high heart rate and trying to just do whatever I can and run through. So because I hadn't practiced that skill of running off into an easy run, it was something that I wasn't able to do, and I let my body just take over, and I ended up just panting and just doing whatever I could and not going to a set pace, but just running the race in front of me, just like my bike. Now, lesson 4 is doing more bike-specific endurance training. So leading on from lesson 3, this was a glaring issue for me because I had in my head I was still a good cyclist. I'd done 100 miles before, I'd done 100K cycles before, I'd cycled from London to Brighton, back to London, so I knew I could handle the sheer endurance. But what I didn't take into account was when I did that was probably back in 2020 or 2021. And it'd been a little while since I'd been on my bike for any type of real duration. And what I was finding is in all my training, it'll be the bike sessions that I decided to miss, because in my head I was thinking, I'll be fine on the bike, I know I can cycle. Now what this then meant was firstly, I had no metrics to work off for the race ahead. So I had no power targets, I had no understanding where my threshold was for a set period of time. Secondly, I thought I was better than I was, so it meant I pushed harder than I really should have. So then thirdly, because I thought I was better than I was, and I hadn't done as much training as I had planned to, it meant when it comes to race day and I had my strategy that I want to put in place, it didn't quite go to plan. So let's now get into lesson number 5. Practice race nutrition in the lead up to your race. Now this one I actually implemented after my first race because I cramped really badly. I had poor consistency in when I was taking on my race nutrition. I had an idea of the amount of carbohydrates I needed to take on, but I didn't really take into consideration properly the electrolytes and also when I was taking those carbohydrates on. So the changes that I made going into the second triathlon was I said every half an hour, this is what I'm going to be taking on. I made sure I portioned everything out accordingly, made sure it was easily accessible, and then I also took into consideration my electrolytes and making sure I'd finished a full bottle that was on my bike, which had enough electrolytes for me there. And then I had a spare bottle for when I was going off on my run, just to try and help with the cramp as much as possible. And for the week leading up to the race, I made sure I was taking in plenty of electrolytes throughout the week to try and keep my stores up high. Now lesson number 6, it's me versus me. Probably the most important lesson that I've taken away from both the races. Now this is a really hard one because I'm a very competitive athlete. And when I'm put in a race, I push hard and I push as hard as I can. Even if I know someone's fitter than me, I'm still going to try and beat them. I'm still going to try and chase them down, and I'm still going to try and win my own battle. However, what that then does, it means I'm not racing the race to my standards, I'm racing the race to their standards, and that's a standard I cannot control. Now, as a hybrid style athlete, where I like to blend both strength training with endurance training, I need to be learning and improving upon previous performances rather than chasing down other athletes. Their performances are out of my control, as I said, whereas I know the data that I've got from my races and I know I can then implement certain strategies to perform better than last time. Now, it doesn't mean I can't race other people for a bit of fun, but in a race that takes 3 hours or thereabouts, it's not going to be one in that middle section. However, in that middle section, if you go too hard, it means you're not going to have that energy or intensity to push in the back end of the race when it comes onto the run. That I have found out in both of my races, and that is something I'm going to make sure I'm going to be practicing and taking on board for my races next year. So in summary, going into this year's off season, I'm getting things ready to put in place now. Even while I'm prepping for a powerlifting competition at this very moment, I'm getting some base miles in now, both on the bike and on the run, to give me the best chance possible going into the new year, ready for my triathlons next year and some other things I've got in store. That means plenty of base building endurance workouts, focusing on all 3 disciplines, the swim, the bike and the run, and then creating targets that I know I can work off when it comes to race day next year, rather than basing off historic data. I want up-to-date data that I would have known that I've properly put in the work for, that are then going to be a true reflection when it comes to race day. So I hope those 6 lessons helped you, especially if you're going into your first Olympic distance triathlons, and hopefully you don't end up making the same mistakes that I did. But even if you do, take note of these mistakes, review your race, see what went good, see what went bad, and then look at ways of implementing changes to make sure your next race you don't have those same problems. If you've got any races coming up or you're training towards anything, put it in the comment section down below. I would love to see what races you're getting up to. And if you want me to cover any specific videos, drop it in the comment section down below and I'll be sure to get back to you there and see what I can do. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to smash the like button. And if you want to see the rest of my journey going from a powerlifter to a triathlete to some other things next year, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you in the next video.